Thanks very much, Michelle. That's absolutely correct. I beg your pardon. So, with schools set to reopen, of course, many legal experts have already weighed in. Some are questioning whether sections of the Constitution prohibiting the risk of a child's well-being could be violated by the reopening of schools. Basic Education Minister Newzroom says the institutions cannot be kept closed because of learners who have underlying conditions, otherwise known as comorbidities. Now, these will be dealt with by a case basis, but does this compromise a child's right to life, a safe environment and human dignity according to the Bill of Rights? Let's get you some legal analysis on this now. We're joined by Litigation Attorney at Adams & Adams, Mthokozisi Maphumulo. Mtho, thanks very much for your time. Welcome to the AM report. So those are the contentious issues, isn't it? The right to life and the right to education appear to be issues that need to be negotiated. Do you think, given what the department had to say yesterday, that those two issues are adequately being negotiated?
Good morning, Ayanda, and good morning to the viewers. Yes, it becomes relevant at this point to balance various provisions. Well, rights as provided on the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, as you've correctly mentioned, right to life and right to education, which are rights expressly provided for by the Constitution. Then looking at the extent of the preparation and the extent of, getting all the necessary staff being prepared for the handling of, the reopening of school. It remains to be seen if the proper procedures and protocols have been put in place and if they are going to be effective. Otherwise, if not, then there is a great threat on right to life and also the other rights that heavily rely on the right to life, because without the enjoyment of a right to life, then you cannot enjoy any other rights enshrined in the Constitution.
You know, there's also been a lot of concerns raised in Mthokozisi about whether or not the Basic Education Department has set unattainable goals, especially, for instance, for pupils who live in working class communities who would be apprehensive about going back to school but simply cannot afford homeschooling. What kind of litigation options are available for parents who feel that they're being forced into a corner by the plans that were detailed by the Basic Education Department yesterday?
Okay, as I've already said, there may be serious social and legal implications by the rushed reopening of schools. Should it happen that there are serious health issues, or school kids and the teachers get sick, and as a result they may also infect their parents, and there may be serious health implications in our communities, then it becomes relevant to somehow trace how the children, the teachers got infected, and if the line can be linked to the point that the children and the teachers got infected as a result of the inadequacy by the government in terms of rushing to the reopening of the schools, then there may be some cases being brought against the government. But having said that, we will have to get into the discussions to see if there were proper measures in place to guide against the infections.
You speak about guidance in the making of this decision. The minister yesterday says it's based on scientific evidence that's come out. Say that is true, and I'm only saying that because many people doubt whether or not that's the case, but say it is true. Will that stand as a defense if government was hauled to court?
There won't be an absolute defense, but it will be very crucial for the government to demonstrate that we got this in information, we've got this evidence, and this is what we did to safeguard. And if the measures that they implemented were in order and they were adequate, then it becomes a defense in that instance. But if they just tell us, well, if the government just tells us that we had this evidence, but we look at what it did with the evidence, then it becomes then possible to say if they were adequate, and if what the government did with the evidence it had, it does not necessarily avoid or try to limit to the greatest extent the possibility of children and teachers being infected, then there may be liability.
Right. You know, Mthokozisi, many people have weighed in on this discussion, but one of the voices that appears to really be missing is that of pupils themselves. I mean, they're humans with basic rights and autonomy. Does what pupils have to say in this regard count for anything, you think, at least insofar as the law is concerned?
In terms of the Children's Act, we will look at the majority of certain children, and do they appreciate the gravity of the situation, the implications. So it's all those considerations, but the Act also, in terms of Section 10 and Section 6 of Children's Act, it requires the government in this context to consult with relevant stakeholders, being parents or school governing bodies, interest groups, because by virtue of their youthfulness, being children, they are vulnerable, and to the greatest extent they rely on proper decisions made by all the relevant stakeholders collectively, being parents and the other in interested groups.
Right, and one of those interested groups, as you mentioned, are teachers themselves. Many really strongly feel that schools will simply not be ready by the 1st of June. Are they protected, some of those teachers that is, if they decide based on that simply not to pitch come the 1st of June?
Well, the government in this case is the employer. So if the employer says, I've put in place measures, I've put in place I've followed safety protocols, then as the employee, you should report to work, unless there are other sound reasons on which you can rely on. But as a matter of there are so many considerations in this case. On the other hand, you need to think about safety. On the other hand, you need to think about rescuing, the school year. And as a teacher, you are a very much relevant stakeholder. And if your employer says, I've put in place all the necessary measures and I need you to report to work, then I think you've got to report to work.
It's quite a difficult decision to have to make. Let's leave things there, at least for now. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. Certainly appreciated here on the AM Report. That was Mthokozisi Maphumulo, who's a litigation attorney with Adams & Adams. So still to come on the AM Report, the